The Longest Journey is a point-and-click graphic adventure game developed by Funcom and released in 1999, although it didn't come out in North America until the following year. The first thing you might think when you see the title is it really The Longest Journey, or was this just like a late 90s version of a clickbait title? The Kinda Long Journey or the Regular Journey doesn't really have the same ring to it. Well, just over 20 hours to complete might not seem like a lot when you compare it to big RPGs or big open world games, but that's easily twice as much as what you got out of many other adventure games back then. The title could also refer to the distance you travel in the game, since you visit a huge variety of places from literally the bottom of the ocean to deep into outer space. Or it could refer to the tremendous amount of dialogue you pour through basically every step of the way. So no, the title isn't misleading. This was a very ambitious game. The best way to play The Longest Journey today is to use ScumVM, a free tool that helps older graphic adventure games run well on modern systems. And make sure to install the HD mod to add upscaled backgrounds and a few other improvements that make the game look significantly better. The Longest Journey kicks off by introducing you to its protagonist, April Ryan, inside one of her dreams.
I'm in my undies. That's so not appropriate.
This intro is cryptic and strange, leaving you with more questions than answers as to what the game's story is actually about. You'll talk to a tree spirit, save a big egg from falling off a cliff, talk to the ghost of a dragon, and get attacked by this, thing, before finally waking up in April's bedroom. The setting here is far in the future, but there's not a lot to indicate that at first. Everything seems pretty normal. Throughout the dream and while you explore her room, April hits you with a bunch of witty comments and shows off her sarcastic personality. This was pretty standard for adventure game protagonists back then, and it's obvious from the beginning that April can pull it off really well. It's not usually laugh-out-loud funny, but it keeps the mood light and never sounds forced. Okay, so things seem pretty nice around here. Hey, who's this?
Hey, babe. Babe, you're looking real sexy today.
Prince Charming here is a pretty well-crafted jerk who's easy to dislike and cringe at, but he's mainly an exception. Most of the other people you encounter early on are laid back, with lots to say that add some layers to the setting and start showing the amount of attention put on the game's writing. April seems to have a pretty good life set out for her. She's an art student, she has a cool landlady, a couple of close friends, and a part-time job that doesn't suck. Or at least only kinda sucks. Things are simple, pleasant, and free from drama, so of course, all of this is about to come to a crashing halt. April's been having weird dreams like the one at the beginning for a while now, but it isn't until she and some of her friends start having crazy visions during the day that she gets thoroughly freaked out enough to try and figure out what's going on. Instead of checking herself into a mental hospital, she seeks out this old guy named Cortez, who likes to hang out outside her apartment building and has made a few comments that indicate he knows what's happening. He's your typical mysterious guy who everyone thinks is a weirdo, but is actually a lot smarter than they think, and he knows all the secrets to the universe, but he won't tell you because he likes to talk in riddles and strange metaphors. However, April eventually does manage to pry some answers out of him, and she learns that there are two separate worlds. A magic world called Arcadia, and the world that April lives in, which is governed by science and technology called Stark. Her dreams and visions were real things bleeding out of Arcadia into Stark. Something has upset the balance between these two worlds, which could become catastrophic if it's not resolved. April has the unique ability to shift between each world, so it's up to her to travel back and forth to find out what's causing all the trouble. What role does this guy have in all of this? None, he's just an asshole.
What an asshole.
You're always deliberately told which world you're traveling through, but even if you weren't, it'd be easy to tell them apart just from the visual design. Stark has some modern looking places like April's apartment and the cafe where she works, but it's definitely still a sci-fi setting with obvious cyberpunk undertones. There's plenty of futuristic technology, but also dystopian and grungy aspects that show how these technological advances did a whole lot of nothing to help solve society's problems. April's an artist though, so at least that didn't get wiped out by AI here. There are homeless people and addicts lying on the side of the road, a cop about to blast a guy's head off just for skateboarding, a canal filled with polluted water outside April's apartment, and people signing their lives away to become colonists, aka slaves on other planets.
I mean, it's slavery, isn't it?
The tone never becomes outright depressing because there's too much humor in the game for things to go that far. There is a kind of dreary atmosphere in a few places though, but it's countered pretty well by some of the relaxing areas nearby. Late in the game, you travel to the richer side of the city where things have a much sleeker and much neater appearance, but this just highlights how downtrodden everyone else who isn't a member of the elite really is. Arcadia, on the other hand, is much brighter and much more optimistic, with lots of natural scenery to contrast the cityscapes in Stark. For the most part, it seems like a pretty generic high fantasy setting, but the developers do add in splashes of their own creativity. Despite an obvious reference to Tolkien in one of the chapter titles, there are no elves, dwarves, or wizards doing crazy smoke tricks. Arcadia has a lot of its own unique fantasy creatures, so it gets some points for that. The pre-rendered backgrounds in both Stark and Arcadia are detailed, atmospheric, and most of them look great, and they hold up even better thanks to the HD mod. Even though you do backtrack and revisit locations, there's still a solid variety of places to explore, and overall it's definitely enough to keep things from ever looking too repetitive or overused. The character models usually look okay from a distance, but when you're zoomed in close, they show their age pretty strongly. There's a separate mod you can use to make them look a little better though. There is one specific character design that I have to mention because of how strange it is. Without spoiling anything, I'll just say that there's a guy who's extremely important to the story, and you spend a big chunk of the game trying to track him down. And then, when you finally meet him, this is what you see. There's a lot of intentional humor in the game, but this guy's role in the story is supposed to be a serious one. But as you can probably imagine, it's impossible to take him seriously at all. Why does he walk around like Frankenstein? Why is he dressed like a hipster? Why are his arms so small? There are also some sluggish and goofy animations during what are supposed to be intense action moments. They're bad, but in a hilarious way, and they don't happen very often, so it's not a big deal. With so much dialogue in the game, it's impressive that there's voice acting for all of it, and more often than not, I thought it sounded really well done. Characters show emotion and enthusiasm and sound, like actual people. Well, usually they do. Sometimes they're overly expressive, but that doesn't really hurt the game and actually makes for some fun and ridiculous characters.
Try 20K on for size, shortcake. Sorry, little missy, but fake IDs cost a moolah.
I'm Freddie Mellon. My mama, Mrs. Dottie Mellon, she owns the theater. Yep, I reckon she does,
Nobody's going in, nobody's coming out. And until those overpaid, underworking service guys get off their butts and back to work, that's the way it's gonna stay.
Lady, I'm miserable. I'm grumpy, and I got a headache. What do you want from me?
There are a few exceptions where the voices sound pretty bland, the most notable one being this lumpy, weird-looking dude, but I'm pretty sure he was made to intentionally sound annoying for a kind of comedic effect.
I am Abnaxus of the Venar, ambassador to the Ireed Council in Marcuria. My people live far from here.
April's character easily has the best performance, which is fitting because you hear from her way more than anyone else. Her constant quips and jokes just wouldn't have hit the same if her lines had been done with a dry or bland delivery.
Because I'm a cruel bitch and I love torturing you. In fact, I've made it my life's mission to haunt you forever and ever with requests for useless forms and documents. It's Constable Guybrush, my toy ape. He doesn't much like being called monkey. This guy's the reason they invented the phrase hitting the bottle. And he's hitting it hard. Well, at least he's not doing Amethyst. That's probably Mickey's handiwork. She's the tool gal around these here parts. I wonder why she put the clamp there, though. I really don't mind working there. It's a nice place. I mean, it ranks nice on a scale from begging for food at the bottom to just scraping by at the top.
Like other adventure games from this era, there isn't much hand-holding when it comes to the game's puzzles, so you have to pay close attention for hints and clues and do a fair bit of pixel hunting. Click on literally everything. You carry some items with you for huge stretches of the game. You might think it'd be satisfying when you finally get to use it for something, which is kinda true, but it's also frustrating because you've probably tried to use it for like a dozen other puzzles by this point and got rejected. And seriously, what kind of psycho carries a chewed up piece of candy with them for that long? Speaking of strange logic, you might be wondering if the puzzles have logical solutions or if there are any that try and burn a hole in your brain. Well, some of them are logical, where the solutions can be deduced from in-game clues or by using sound reasoning. But there are a couple that are there to stump you, where the hints are vague at best, so you might find yourself relying on trial and error, which makes them feel less satisfying to solve. And there are a few solutions that just feel too random or far-fetched. There's one infamous puzzle that almost always gets brought up whenever anyone talks about the game. It's where you have to build a ridiculous contraption using a rubber duck to pick up a key on a subway track without getting electrocuted. You build this thing using such a random assortment of items that really the only way to solve it is to just try mashing together items in your inventory and hope something happens, instead of actually trying to think the problem through. The duck being made of rubber should be a solid clue, but what really irks me is that you actually have a rubber glove in your inventory at this point in the game, and it would make way more sense for April to use this and ask a friend or a bystander to help lower her down so she can grab the key. Thanks largely to this puzzle and a few others, The Longest Journey earned a reputation with some people for having moon logic puzzles, which isn't totally false, but I do think it's blown out of proportion, because the majority of them are actually okay and not excessively difficult. As long as you're able to put up with a few frustrating ones, or just check a guide whenever you get to those, then the rest are actually decent enough that you can still have a good time with them. But it's still fair to say that the puzzles aren't the game's strongest aspect. That would be the story. Stories with alternate worlds or universes are nothing new, and part of what makes these entertaining is experiencing up close how different or unique these other worlds are. The Longest Journey definitely spends a lot of time crafting its worlds, but overall the story still feels mostly character driven. And I was always way more interested in what April thought or how she felt about these places than any of the actual lore or history surrounding them. That's not to say that the worlds are boring or poorly designed, although they do seem a little derivative. But I think April's character definitely steals the show.
April Ryan, you have got to get past yourself.
She goes through a few different phases throughout the game that gives you some insight about her character from multiple angles. First is the denial phase. This is at the beginning where she's dealing with crazy dreams, hallucinations, and the fact that this weirdo outside her apartment somehow knows what she's dreaming about. She doesn't want to believe that any of this stuff is real or that it's meaningful in any way, because she just wants to have a normal life. Maybe you think that makes her boring because who would want to do regular stuff all day when you could be out crash landing a flying castle, fighting sharks at the bottom of the ocean, or talking to a raging alcoholic who was born hundreds of years ago? But if you do some investigating early on by talking to her friends and reading her diary, it becomes a lot more understandable. You learn that she just ran away from a pretty messed up family situation and came to live in the city all by herself with basically no money so that she can go to art school. Okay, now I can sympathize with her a little, and this shows that she has some guts, so I found myself rooting for her right from the beginning. Yeah, shut up Cortez, we don't need any of your crap today. The next two phases are the fish out of water phase, where April explores Arcadia in a pretty confused and awestruck state, and then the growth and learning phase, where she comes to grips with her role in the plot as the hopeful savior of the two worlds. Throughout the game, she's constantly out of her element and faced with seemingly impossible challenges, but always manages to pull herself together and keep going while maintaining a lighthearted mood about things. And even though she handles all this stuff very admirably, the game never resorts to making her into an invincible Wonder Woman who can solve any problem and do anything because, you know, she's just better than everyone. April shows vulnerability by voicing her anxieties and doubts about basically everything that's happening, and definitely struggles to take it all in.
It's impossible, Cortez. I can't do these things. I'm 18. I'm an artist. No, not even that. I'm nobody. You can't place all these responsibilities on my shoulders. I can't carry that much.
Stories with incredibly competent characters can be fun too, but I usually prefer the ones with more relatable or realistic characters. Now throw in her likable personality and sense of humor on top of all this, and yeah, the writers really knocked it out of the park with their protagonist here. Some of the other characters make the most out of their screen time too, like the paranoid recluse Flipper who talks like an absolute maniac, or Crow, the talking bird who spent years locked inside of a chest and likes hitting on female sparrows. There are a few side characters with depth and history that you can explore, but it's really the eccentric personalities that I thought made most of them enjoyable. The Longest Journey has a few minor subplots, usually where you help someone or a group of creatures resolve a conflict and then they, in turn, help April on her mission. I know that sounds very typical, but this is where some of the strange creatures and lore make things feel a bit more original. However, overall, the plot is mostly a standard, chosen one tries to save the world story. It does wander into cliché territory from time to time, but the writers use a pretty simple but effective trick to avoid making this feel too cheesy. And that is that occasionally the characters will actually point this out, which makes these situations seem more believable because that's probably how a normal person would react if they felt like their life was playing out like a book or a movie.
I have to. Cliché or not, it's our only hope.
You do this often then? You know, save worlds?
It's an expression. Heroism in my world is more of a cliché than anything else. Yeah, hi, how are you? I'm the chosen one. Can you help me save the world from evil and chaos?
Isn't it such a cliche, though? I don't look forward to seeing him again, but it will be nice to be back with the rest of the family.
Where do you get all those cliches, kin to my kin? Doesn't it ever bother you that you sound like a badly written play?
A pretty significant amount of the game's dialogue is also dedicated to world building. Since April spent her entire life up until the events of the game totally oblivious to the fact that another world exists, she usually has absolutely no idea what's what, and a lot of the side characters have to explain things to her, especially while you explore Arcadia. Some of this is sprinkled into conversations or shown in a subtle way, but there are a few big lore dumps where you have to sit through long periods of seemingly endless dialogue. And for some reason, out of all the crazy personalities you run into in the game, the developers decided to choose the least charismatic characters for a few of these conversations, so some of them were pretty hard to get through. You can skip through these if you want and just read April's diary to get the most important stuff, but it's really just the bare bones of it, so you'll probably feel like you missed out on something. Like some of the cliches, April does occasionally poke fun at these conversations, like when she falls asleep during this old man's story. The details they're explaining can be pretty interesting, and the emphasis on world building is impressive, but I still wish they had found a way to liven up these conversations or condense the information a little. It's not uncommon to see The Longest Journey ranked very high on all-time lists of adventure games. I wasn't quite as captivated by its setting as some of its fans were, but I do still think that it's a good game. Somewhat flawed, sure, but the entertaining protagonist, all the humor, and its dedication to storytelling makes it an interesting title that I've revisited a few times over the years. It did get a sequel and a third game after that, Dreamfall and Dreamfall Chapters. I never played Chapters, but I played a little bit of Dreamfall, which seemed alright at first, but I lost interest a few hours in and never finished it. That was years ago though, and my memory about it is shaky. I've seen some people stick up for the sequels, so maybe I'll give them another chance someday. If you wait for a sale, you can get The Longest Journey for like $3 on Steam or GOG, which I think is definitely worth it if you enjoy traditional adventure games and don't mind something with a ton of dialogue. If you've played it before but haven't used the HD mod, then I think it's worth revisiting to check out that too.
Excuse me. I'm talking to you. Stop.
Screw you, Jerry.